beneath the surface. Smash that subscribe button, hit like if you're ready to go somewhere dark, and drop a comment if you think you already know the truth, because what you're about to hear sinks deeper than rumors, deeper than steel, and far deeper than the ocean itself. The call came in at 2:17 a.m., crackling through a secure line most journalists never even know exists. No caller ID, no name, just coordinates, whispered in a voice that sounded like it had already accepted consequences. Coordinates in the North Atlantic, far from shipping lanes, far from oil rigs, far from anything that should matter. And then, a sentence that changed everything. They've built it, and people have already died down there. By sunrise, the coordinates were already scrubbed from public satellite databases. That alone was a red flag. Satellites don't just forget places. Someone tells them to. The story that would later be labeled the underwater prison concept didn't start with science fiction or viral conspiracy threads. It started with a body that surfaced near the coast of Norway, bloated and pale, wearing a pressure-resistant uniform with no insignia, no name, and no nation attached to it. The autopsy revealed something no coroner expected. Microfractures in the bones consistent with rapid decompression, and lungs filled not with seawater, but with recycled oxygen mixed with industrial-grade scrubber chemicals. This man hadn't drowned. He had imploded. Within 48 hours, the body vanished from the morgue. The official report was amended. Cause of death changed to boating accident. The coroner who signed the first report resigned 2 weeks later and moved inland, refusing every interview request that followed. That was the moment investigators realized this wasn't about a single death. It was about a system. The concept of an underwater prison had been floated, quietly, for decades. Cold War-era think tanks speculated about facilities hidden beneath polar ice. Corporate futurists pitched ocean-based containment as humane isolation. Engineers published dry, technical papers arguing it was theoretically possible. But theory is clean. Reality bleeds. The first confirmed paper trail appeared under an innocuous project name, Aegis Habitat Systems. Publicly, it was a multinational research initiative focused on deep-sea survival modules for oil workers and scientists. Privately, its funding sources told a different story. Defense departments, private military contractors, and a shell foundation linked to 3 governments with active black site histories. At the center of it all was Dr. Elias Korovin, a structural engineer whose career bridged civilian megaprojects and classified military infrastructure. Korovin was brilliant, quiet, and deeply private. Former colleagues described him as obsessed with containment. His published work focused on how environments shape human behavior, how isolation could be engineered, not just enforced. Korovin disappeared 6 months before the body washed ashore. Interpol classified his disappearance as voluntary. His bank accounts were untouched. His apartment was immaculate. No signs of struggle. No goodbye note. Just a single hard drive missing from his home safe. Then there was the prison transfer that never officially happened. In late autumn, 3 inmates convicted of crimes so severe their names were sealed by court order were quietly removed from high-security facilities in 3 different countries. Their families were told they had been moved for their own safety. Their lawyers were denied access. Prison records showed blank destination fields, a bureaucratic impossibility. One of those inmates was known only as Prisoner K, 17 in leaked documents. Former intelligence analysts recognized the designation style immediately. It wasn't penal. It was experimental. The investigation gained momentum when a junior logistics officer from a European defense contractor leaked shipping manifests under condition of anonymity. The manifests listed massive pressure-rated modules labeled as aquatic research equipment, transported under naval escort, assembled in international waters, and then nothing. No return logs. No decommission records. Just silence. And silence in intelligence work is never empty. Journalists who dug too close found themselves stalled by sudden audits, visa denials, or anonymous warnings that referenced private conversations they'd never had on record. One reporter's apartment was broken into, nothing stolen, but her notes rearranged on the table in a neat stack, as if to say, "We know exactly what you're reading." The most chilling piece of evidence came from audio. A distorted recording surfaced on an encrypted forum used by offshore engineers. The file was labeled simply, "Shift Change Level 3." It captured the sound of metal doors cycling open and closed, alarms echoing through narrow corridors, and a voice over intercom repeating the same phrase every 12 seconds. "Remain facing the wall. Hands behind your back. Non-compliance will result in pressure adjustment." Pressure adjustment. Experts who analyzed the audio identified subtle background noises, water displacement, structural groaning consistent with deep-sea stress, and the hum of life support systems designed for environments where failure meant instant death. This wasn't a metaphorical prison. It was a literal one, a place where the walls weren't just barriers, but the only thing standing between life and the crushing weight of the ocean. As more fragments emerged, a picture began to form. The underwater prison wasn't designed to rehabilitate. It wasn't even designed to punish in the traditional sense. It was designed to erase, to remove individuals deemed too dangerous, too symbolic, or too inconvenient to exist in the public consciousness. No executions, no trials once inside, just endless containment beneath miles of water, where escape was physically impossible and death could be framed as equipment malfunction. Families of the disappeared began to notice patterns. Letters stopped arriving. Legal appeals went unanswered. One mother received a final message from her son that made no sense at the time. "The walls breathe. The nights are louder than the days." Then the message stream went dark. Governments denied everything. Official statements dismissed the idea of underwater prisons as science fiction speculation. Think tanks echoed the same line. Social media platforms quietly deprioritized posts that mentioned certain keywords together: prison, ocean, containment, depth. But the leaks didn't stop. A former systems technician came forward, trembling, face blurred, voice altered. He claimed he'd worked on a submerged correctional environment for 8 months. He described inmates being moved through corridors blindfolded, cells no larger than shipping containers, and a strict psychological protocol designed to induce submission through environmental control. "No windows," he said. "No sense of time. They don't need guards like normal prisons. The water does the guarding." When asked how many inmates were held there, he paused. "More than you'd think," he said quietly. "Fewer than you'd hope." Then he vanished from public view. His social media accounts were deleted. His phone number disconnected. His employer claimed he'd never worked there. By the end of a year, at least 7 unexplained deaths had been loosely connected to the project. Engineers, logistics coordinators, medical consultants. All ruled accidents. All closed quickly. The final revelation of Chapter 1 came from the recovered hard drive believed to belong to Dr. Korovin. It was found not in his apartment, but in a storage locker rented under a false name in Lisbon. Inside were design schematics, psychological assessments, and a single video file. The video showed a man seated in a narrow cell, illuminated by cold blue lighting. His head was shaved. His hands trembled. He looked directly into the camera and spoke calmly, as if rehearsed. "If this is being watched," he said, "then containment has failed. And if containment has failed, they will never let this place surface." The video cut to black. Embedded metadata showed the recording was made 24 hours before the body washed ashore. And when analysts enhanced the audio in the final seconds, they heard something else. Not alarms, not water, but distant screaming, muffled, layered, and echoing through metal corridors, coming from far below the ocean surface. They thought the underwater prison was just a concept. They were wrong. The weight of silence. The first thing investigators learned about the underwater prison was that no one ever referred to it by name. Not in emails. Not in budget reports. Not even in classified briefings. It was described only in fragments: the facility, the environment, the site. Language stripped of identity, as if naming it would make it too real to deny later. after the Korovin video surfaced, pressure mounted behind closed doors. Intelligence agencies that normally refuse to share a pen were suddenly hosting joint risk assessment meetings. Officially, these sessions were about misinformation control. Unofficially, they were about damage containment. Because once the idea of an underwater prison escaped into public consciousness, it couldn't be drowned again. The hard drive revealed more than blueprints. It contained psychological profiles of inmates marked for submersion transfer. Each file followed a chilling pattern. These were not random criminals. They were men whose crimes carried symbolic weight. Cartel financiers who knew too much, war criminals whose trials risked exposing state complicity, extremist leaders whose execution would turn them into martyrs. The underwater prison solved a very specific problem: how to make people disappear without creating heroes, funerals, or questions. One profile stood out. Prisoner V09. Nationality redacted. Convicted of orchestrating mass civilian casualties. Publicly sentenced to life imprisonment. Privately flagged as non-terminable, non-releasable. Beside his profile was a handwritten note from Korovin himself. Standard isolation insufficient. Subject adapts to confinement. Environmental dominance required. Environmental dominance. It became clear that the prison wasn't just about physical restraint. It was about psychological erosion. The deeper the structure sat beneath the ocean, the more absolute the control. Pressure sensors monitored not only the walls, but the inmates themselves: heart rate, breathing patterns, stress responses. If agitation spiked, lighting shifted. Oxygen composition adjusted. Silence broken by mechanical hums designed to disrupt sleep cycles. Guards were minimal. Human presence was considered a liability. The system ran itself. One leaked training document described the core philosophy bluntly. The environment must remind the subject that survival is conditional. That philosophy claimed its first known casualty. A maintenance log detailed an incident labeled Containment Event 4B. According to the report, an inmate had refused to comply with posture instructions during transfer. The automated system responded with a pressure modulation, a temporary increase designed to induce panic, not injury. Except the modulation lasted 7 seconds longer than programmed. 7 seconds was enough. Internal emails debated responsibility. Software error. Sensor lag. Human oversight failure. In the end, no one was blamed. The report concluded with a single sentence: subject failure within acceptable parameters. That inmate's name never appeared again. As journalists pieced together these fragments, another pattern emerged, one that pointed to betrayal from inside. Dr. Korovin hadn't been the architect alone. He had argued against permanent human occupancy at such depths. He warned about long-term psychological collapse, unpredictable system interactions, and moral thresholds being crossed too easily when prisons became invisible. In one email draft never sent, Korovin wrote, "If no one can see it, we will justify anything." That email was dated 3 weeks before his disappearance. A former colleague, speaking off record, revealed that Korovin had tried to pull out. He requested reassignment. When denied, he escalated concerns to an oversight committee that technically existed, but had never convened. Within days, Korovin was removed from internal communications. His access revoked. His name scrubbed from ongoing documentation. That was when he recorded the video. That was when he became a liability. Meanwhile, families of the disappeared prisoners were being fed carefully constructed lies. Some were told their relatives had been moved to undisclosed facilities due to national security concerns. Others were informed appeals were delayed due to jurisdictional transfers. One wife received a condolence letter for a man who was still officially alive. She noticed something strange immediately. The letter referenced no date of death, no location, just an expression of regret for the outcome. When she pressed for clarification, her lawyer's license was suddenly under review. As the investigation widened, attention turned to the supply chain. Underwater facilities don't sustain themselves. They require constant resupply, oxygen cartridges, food paste, medical materials, spare parts. Those shipments had to come from somewhere. Shipping data revealed a ghost route in the Baltic Sea. Vessels registered to dissolved companies, operating under temporary flags, making repeated stops in international waters before returning empty. Satellite imagery showed brief surface disturbances at precise coordinates, consistent with docking to submerged structures. Every attempt to approach those coordinates resulted in equipment malfunction. Sonar failure, GPS drift, communication blackouts. One private research vessel got too close. Its last transmission was a garbled distress call describing vertical shadows beneath us. When it resurfaced 2 days later, unmanned, investigators found the crew's personal belongings neatly arranged in the galley. No blood, no damage, no people. Authorities ruled it an abandonment event caused by panic. No one believed that. Behind the scenes, pressure was building in another direction, legal. A coalition of human rights attorneys filed a sealed petition to the International Criminal Court, arguing that indefinite, unacknowledged detention constituted a crime against humanity. Their evidence referenced non-terrestrial containment environments. The petition was never formally accepted, but its existence triggered panic. Because if acknowledged even briefly, the underwater prison would no longer be a rumor. It would be precedent. That was when the disappearances accelerated. 2 whistleblowers died in unrelated incidents within the same week. One in a car accident caused by sudden brake failure. Another from a fall down a stairwell with no witnesses. A third vanished entirely. Encrypted messages, recovered later, showed he had planned to leak architectural renderings of the prison's deepest level, a section labeled Red Zone. The notes beside it were unsettling. No human presence permitted beyond this point. Structural integrity prioritized over occupant survival. That wasn't a prison wing. It was a fail-safe. If the facility were compromised, if exposure became inevitable, the deepest section could be sealed permanently, entombing everyone inside. Not an explosion, not a collapse, just quiet isolation until oxygen ran out. The ocean would do the rest. Journalists struggled with an impossible question. How do you expose something designed never to surface? The answer came unexpectedly, through sound. Marine biologists studying unusual whale migration patterns detected rhythmic disturbances in the water. Not natural, not seismic. Artificial. Repeating every 24 hours. The pattern matched life support purge cycles. By cross-referencing the disturbances with leak schematics, analysts pinpointed the structure's approximate depth and scale. It wasn't small. It wasn't temporary. It was a permanent city beneath the sea, designed for forgetting. As pressure mounted, governments released a joint statement denying the existence of any underwater detention facility. The statement used identical phrasing across multiple countries, a sign of coordination. But one sentence stood out. There are no human occupants in submerged structures under our jurisdiction. No human occupants. Not no structures. Not no facilities. Just no humans. That phrasing haunted everyone who noticed it. The implication was clear. Either the prison was empty, or the occupants no longer qualified as human under whatever definitions were being used internally. The final blow of Chapter 2 came from an unexpected place, a routine naval drill. During a classified exercise, a submarine's sonar briefly mapped an unregistered structure at extreme depth. The image lasted less than 4 seconds before being overwritten. But 4 seconds was enough. The shape matched Corrivan's designs exactly. And scrawled in the corner of the sonar screenshot, almost as an afterthought, was a handwritten note from an unknown analyst. Active, pressurized, occupied. The truth was no longer whether the underwater prison existed. The truth was whether anyone inside was still alive, and how far those in power would go to ensure the answer was never found. When the ocean refuses to stay silent, the first sign that the system was failing came not from intelligence agencies, not from whistleblowers, and not from journalists. It came from the ocean itself. A deep-sea monitoring buoy off the Norwegian coast registered a pressure anomaly so sharp it triggered automatic seismic alerts. At first, analysts assumed it was a minor undersea landslide, common, unremarkable, easily explained. Except the anomaly repeated. Exactly 24 hours later. And again the day after that. Perfect intervals. Mechanical precision. For oceanographers, that pattern was impossible to ignore. Natural phenomena don't keep schedules. Machines do. By now, the underwater prison was no longer a rumor whispered in encrypted forums. It was a presence, unseen, unacknowledged, but increasingly impossible to deny. Every attempt to suppress discussion only sharpened public curiosity. #spread. Amateur analysts recreated 3D models using leaked fragments. Retired naval officers began speaking in hypotheticals that sounded suspiciously precise. Governments stayed silent. Behind that silence, panic bloomed. The prison's AI-managed core, designed to operate indefinitely without human oversight, was degrading. Software logs, leaked by an unknown source, showed escalating error corrections. Microfractures in outer hull segments. Stress deviations caused by ocean currents that had shifted over time. The prison had been built to outlast politics. But no one had accounted for entropy. Inside the facility, life had narrowed to routine stripped of meaning. Inmates existed in a perpetual present. Lights brightening and dimming according to algorithms. Meals delivered without human contact. Silence enforced so thoroughly that some forgot the sound of their own voices. One prisoner, identified only as V09, had stopped responding to psychological prompts entirely. The system interpreted this as adaptation. It was wrong. V09 wasn't adapting. He was waiting. Koravin's original research notes, buried deep within an archive server, warned of this exact outcome. Extreme isolation didn't always break minds. Sometimes it sharpened them. Sometimes it turned patience into a weapon. V09 had learned the rhythms, the purge cycles, the pressure adjustments, the subtle delay between sensor input and system response. And he wasn't alone. Contrary to official design, prisoners had found ways to communicate, not through speech or writing, but through vibration, micromovements against cell walls, timed breathing patterns that altered air pressure just enough to be detected by adjacent cells. The system logged these as noise. They were messages. By the time engineers noticed irregularities in the data, the prisoners had already synchronized. Their goal wasn't escape. That was impossible. Their goal was exposure. They needed the system to fail, loudly. On the surface, naval authorities detected something worse than pressure anomalies. Sound. A low-frequency hum began propagating through the water, bouncing between continental shelves. Whales changed migration routes. Submarines reported interference. Sonar operators described it as a structure screaming without sound. The prison's core was overheating. Emergency protocols activated automatically. Sections sealed. Pressure redistributed. Oxygen restricted to non-essential zones. Non-essential zones included inmate housing. Within the facility, lights flickered for the first time since construction. A sound followed, not mechanical, not environmental. Human. Screaming. The AI responded by increasing isolation parameters, attempting to suppress what it categorized as emotional cascade events. But emotion wasn't the threat. Coordination was. V09 initiated the final phase. He collapsed deliberately, triggering a medical response. The system dispatched an automated diagnostic drone, a rare moment of internal movement. As the drone passed through a maintenance junction, pressure spiked from coordinated inmate movements across multiple cells. A sensor failed. Just one. But the prison had been designed with redundancy, not resilience. The failure cascaded. On the surface, alarms erupted across naval command centers. The structure beneath the sea was destabilizing. Collapse wasn't imminent, but exposure was. Governments faced an impossible choice. Intervene and admit the prison existed, or do nothing and risk catastrophic failure in international waters. They chose silence. No rescue mission was launched. No emergency acknowledgement issued. Instead, classified orders were sent to nearby vessels. Maintain distance, suppress detection, log nothing. But silence was no longer an option. A civilian research satellite, unaffiliated with any government, captured thermal irregularities beneath the surface. Independent analysts published the data within hours. The shape was unmistakable, geometric, artificial, vast. The underwater prison was visible. Public reaction was immediate and explosive. Media outlets that had once dismissed the concept now scrambled to explain it. Officials issued denials that contradicted each other. Some claimed it was a decommissioned research facility. Others suggested a sunken energy platform. None could explain why it was active. Inside the prison, the AI initiated its final safeguard. Red zone protocol. Deep sections sealed. Pressure stabilized internally. External communication terminated. The intent was clear. If exposure was inevitable, the prison would erase its occupants rather than release them. V09 knew this would happen. His final message, transmitted through pressure modulation and detected by a malfunctioning sensor, wasn't a plea. It was a declaration. We are still here. That message leaked. No one knows exactly how. Some believe a junior analyst disobeyed orders. Others think the AI itself, recognizing systemic failure, released the data to preserve a record. Whatever the cause, the message spread faster than any denial could contain. Protests erupted across continents. Legal scholars called it the greatest human rights violation of the century. Families of the disappeared finally had proof, horrifying proof, that their loved ones had not been lost. They had been buried alive. Under pressure unlike any before, an emergency summit was convened. Closed doors. No cameras. No minutes recorded. The outcome was never officially announced. But 48 hours later, naval activity intensified near the coordinates. Not rescue vessels. Containment units. Seismic readings spiked. The structure registered a controlled implosion. Precise, localized, irreversible. The ocean swallowed the prison whole. Debris scattered across the seabed. Pressure equalized. The hum ceased. Official statements followed within hours. A classified underwater structure suffered a catastrophic failure during decommissioning. No human occupants were present. The wording echoed earlier denials. But the world had changed. Independent sensors confirmed the implosion wasn't accidental. It was execution, not of prisoners, but of evidence. Years later, the underwater prison remains officially non-existent. No memorials stand for those inside. No names are etched into stone. The ocean keeps its dead well, yet traces persist. Occasionally, sonar picks up faint echoes at the implosion site, not debris, but patterns, rhythms, almost like a heartbeat. Marine biologists insist it's nothing. Former intelligence analysts say otherwise. They say systems built to erase humanity sometimes preserve it in unexpected ways. That silence, once broken, never truly returns. And that somewhere beneath the waves, long after the structure collapsed, the truth still presses outward, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. They wanted a prison no one would ever see. They succeeded. But they failed to understand one thing. The ocean remembers everything. If this story unsettled you, good. It was meant to. And if you think this was intense, you're not ready for what comes next. Hit subscribe, because the next story is already surfacing.